welcome back to Run the Terra, episode 33. I am Grandmaster Dan.
I'm Adam Edelman Munoz.
And Stan,
yeah.
Okay, Stan is not here. He's actually, he's at Riot HQ right now. He is finalizing those nerfs to Lee Sin and Bastion. We finally convinced Riot. They're bringing Black Spear back to 2, baby. Look for it in the next patch. Today we're going to talk about the metagame currently. We're going to talk about my, let's just say harrowing ladder experience. Adam might talk about the meta and the ladder as well. And then we're going to speculate on what we think Stan is bringing to us via the nerfs and changes. And maybe through his sock puppet, Steve Rubin, a.k.a. Rubin Zoo.
That asshole was not willing to tell us ahead of time this time, so we're going to be as in the dark as you guys are.
Exactly. And if anyone's keeping count, this means that Adam and I have had 33 episodes, and Stan is now only at 31. That's for y'all keeping count. But let's jump into the metagame now. I guess I will talk a little bit about it. Feel free to chime in, but really what I've been seeing is a lot of Lee Sin in various manners, combined with just as many burst spell speeds as you can. And that's actually true of most decks. And then I've seen smatterings of discard aggro. That's actually what I've been playing a lot of this past couple weeks. I guess really this past week. And then a little bit of Pirate Burn and a ton of War Mother Control or Ramp or some sort of Trundle with kill spells cards. What about you, Adam? What have you been seeing?
I've been seeing a fair amount of Shyvana, actually.
Really?
Think it may just be that I'm playing in the shitter tier and you're playing against more real decks, but I'm seeing like a surprising amount of just like Shyvana with Shyvana Leona, Shyvana Aesol, Shyvana, all sorts of other random crap.
What tier are you currently in, actually? I think this is important to...
like silver something.
Okay. Yeah.
I usually play a few games of ladder every month just to remember what the ladder looks like, and then I go jam random shit in casual because I like playing random shitty decks.
Yeah, so this can kind of segue into my ladder time. But are you sure you're in silver and not in iron 4? Because I made the same mistake this week.
Fuck, I'd have to check. It has been a while since I've cared about my ladder rank.
Yeah.
Because I was in silver for a few seasons, and silver, I ground up to gold once or twice. I have trouble caring all that much.
That's pretty fair.
And once you run into enough ropers in a row on ladder, you decide that you want to go where people aren't caring as much.
Yeah, that's fair. I just mentioned this because, as we all know, I'm a Grandmaster, of course, and I've signed a exclusive NDA with Riot. It's a one-way NDA in which I can talk about it, about how I'm Grandmaster, but they can't, and how I'm the only Grandmaster. But I had a Smurf account that I was sitting on that's just been slowly decaying since, I guess, right after the beta. And so I pop in to play some games, and I'm sitting there grinding up a little bit, and I'm like, wow, people are getting pretty aggressive or pretty sweaty in silver tier. In silver, I was seeing exclusively the meta decks, the tier 1 meta decks. I was losing a couple games. And then I noticed when I was losing games, my rank wasn't going down at all. And I was like, that's an interesting change to silver. So I grind my way up through up to silver 1, and then realize, to get into gold, I'm facing off against a copper 4 player. And that's when it hit me that I had D-ranked all the way down to iron 4. And was in the shittest of shit tiers, apparently getting bodied by other iron players. Apparently this is a thing that they do with League, where you have to just absolutely grind your face off to get anywhere. But I feel like the competition has heavily increased up and down the ladder. We might want to look at revisiting sort of a ladder guide as well, because wow, has it changed.
I wonder if that's a function of either the hype dying down so that the player base is now on average a more dedicated player, or if it's or alternately it's a function of the hype increasing and the player base increasing, and there's just like a larger swath of players populating the upper ranks, pushing down the less skilled players. But I'm not sure. Like, I don't know exactly what the weighting of the functions are. I don't know exactly which of those phenomena is more likely to cause stronger players to be at lower ranks. Because it's not just an easy answer.
My guess, and I suppose it's more hope than guess, is that it is in fact hype building around this like 10K season tournament thing, and that there are in fact more people coming, and there's just a greater sort of baseline average of players now. My other guess was that because back in the days of like early, or I guess late beta, early release, there wasn't a sort of centralized area to go to, or that was no centralized area to like discuss the meta or solve the meta. You could kind of get away with just kind of grinding up maybe about 12 ranks with the quote-unquote new meta deck because you were watching the swim stream, or you were, you know, tuning into Bruised by God's gameplay before anyone else was. But now it's kind of all compiled into like one or two places, be it like Reddit or you know, other websites that will not be named.
So the average player is so maybe informed. It's not that the players are changing, but the information is changing. That makes sense too.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that happens in other games. Hearthstone, it happened pretty quickly because Hearthstone's a pretty big and pretty data-driven game as far as the player base goes.
Exactly.
I mean, and obviously it happened in Magic to the point where they changed the way they release information in Magic because of that.
Yeah, and I would actually like to give a quick shout out here to the LOR competitive subreddit. I actually just found this week. It has like 14,000 members in it. And that's where I found some information. There's a guy by the name of Dr. Lore, a little shout out to him because he did a great breakdown of a bunch of the meta decks and what their win rate actually is based off Bayesian smoothing, which I don't want to get into that for all you eggheads out there, but effectively just like standing it around the fact that a lot more of these decks on average are lower win rates, so they had to like bump. It's kind of like when everyone in your class fails, and so you all get bumped up a little bit. That's basically what it was. But actually pointed out that over the past, I guess, really this meta, the top win ratingest decks, or the winningest decks, I should say, are War Mother and Nightfall Aggro, both taking that like 57%, Ashe at 56%, and then Lee Sin sitting right at the cusp of like 55, 56. But mainly what he showed was that, yeah, if you're not playing Trundle, Lee Sin, or the Nightfall package, you're kind of making a huge mistake. Like you're just like leaving very many percentage points on the table.
Dude, as a stats nerd myself, I have to check this out because
I'll actually send you a link right now.
Frankly, I'm a huge fan of Bayesian methodology and what you can do with it.
Yo, shout out Bays.
Yes, please.
Shout out Bays. Shout out my boy Bays. You think we can get Bays on the podcast for an interview?
Probably not.
But yeah, I think it was a pretty interesting breakdown. I was actually, prior to reading this, I was sitting on the the naked Lee Sin deck, or I was running Lee Sin with maybe like one or two Diana, and I was just like losing a couple points here and there to like dumb stuff, and then I actually swapped over to back to Nightfall Aggro, which I think I mentioned a couple pods ago about how I just really enjoyed it and just started like grind. I mean, I grinded up about 4 ranks because of it. I do feel like the combo of being able to take out your opponent's creatures, plus being on a faster clock to go underneath a Lee Sin or War Mother is super important right now.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And just in general, I like decks that are playing heavily to the board in Legends. We'll get into it a bit more when we talk about that interview with Steve Rubin, but basically it is now a confirmed design philosophy and not just something we're rampantly speculating on. Removal is supposed to be bad in this game, and it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have done their job, and it does disappoint, at least for me, and I guess for us here. But yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about the current meta and how it feels. So I mean, for me, I think, well, at least Adam knows this, and I guess Stan does, but he's not here to confirm it. But I had a very heated exchange on our Discord about it. I said, I'm about done with this fucking game. What did I say? It's so fucking sweaty. I thought I was in silver. Turns out I was in fucking iron. Blah, blah, blah. Zero interactivity. Because it's blah, blah, blah. It saves everything for burst speed except for Kench's snack time. So yeah, it just feels like every deck I'm playing against I'm playing about 3 to 4 burst spells a turn, and then we kind of just throw the cards on the table and see what happens. It feels like burst has taken up a larger and larger share of my decks that I construct, because it's the optimal thing to do.
I mean, you've heard this refrain from me before. Card games are often about risk and reward and making decisions with incomplete information, and burst speed spells have very little risk and are not appropriately penalized in the reward. Right, so I mean, I'm going to keep referencing Magic because it's the industry standard, it's a game I love, I have played it long enough, I know more about it than pretty much anything else.
Sure.
There are cards... There are only effectively 2 speeds in Magic. What would be called slow.
What about split
in Legend? I'll talk about that in a moment.
I know.
Basically, slow and fast, right?
Yeah.
And if you take a slow effect and make it a fast effect, you usually add a mana to it.
At least.
And it's. And then, they actually did experiment with some effectively burst speed cards in the very early portion of the game, but to make the rules work, they changed it. But there are a few cards that work at sort of burst speed, and those cards are usually penalized and extra mana effectively.
Yep.
Or they're a mana, but the effect is a bit weaker than you might normally get, something like that.
Exactly.
The point being, burst speed effects are incredibly powerful because they have no risk to them, right? Or if they have risk, the risk is contained in what the effect is, which means that you're not costing it separately. I'm having trouble making the sentence make sense. Give me a moment. If the risk is in the effect and not in the cost, or not in the possibility of failure, then there's a sort of baseline, right? Whatever the effect does, you get that much out of it. So in a game that has 3-4 hard removal spells in the entire game, I guess more if you count the Celestial Obliterate cards, but in a game that has maybe 4 or 5 ways of just absolutely answering something, if you have a burst speed buff spell, which is what we're really talking about when we're talking about burst speed effects.
Yeah.
If you have a burst speed buff spell, at the very minimum, you're going to get whatever numbers that effect gives you, and you will be able to translate those numbers into something because of the way the cards are balanced. So, circling back, because we're talking about why this is a bad thing, because maybe this is the type of games you like, right? You like playing to the board, and Riot have made it pretty clear that they want you to play to the board. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The reason this is bad, at least the burst speed portion of it is bad, is that if you take no risks, games become much more deterministic.
Yeah. Right.
If you in the ultimate reductionist sense, right? Assume you have only one unit slot, and you're playing one unit and you're making it big, right? Whoever has the biggest unit will win the combat and therefore the game. And if every burst speed card you play, and if every card you play is burst speed, then anytime you try to make your unit bigger, it will just be bigger, right? So you play your counting game and you see who has the most and wins. And that's, not as interesting as a game where sometimes the person who has more numbers, more buffs, more resources, can lose to someone who uses their resources better.
Yep.
Right? It takes in that way, it takes an element of skill expression out of the game. So this is a long walk down a winding path to come back to something you've heard us say a lot, which is removal should be better, black speed are too.
Yeah, exactly. This is also something I kind of think is important to mention. So this, I guess, is a bit of history if you don't know it, but there's these cards in Magic called the Magic Invitational cards, cards that were designed by like winners of a Magic championship or something of the sort, and they would get to not only be the face of the card, like they'd be on the card, their likeness, but also they'd get to, in a sense, shape what the card did. And many of these cards started out, their first revision were insanely powerful. Like, I'm trying to remember what Snapcaster was, but I think it was like a 2/2 that flashed back a spell for free and it costed 2 mana or something like that.
No, Snapcaster was the second submission. The first submission was a land that you could discard to counter a spell as an ability. It was basically an uncounterable counter spell.
So even more insane.
So to put it in Legends of Runeterra terms, because obviously not everyone who's here plays Magic, think of it as a 2 or 3 mana deny that you can use on opposing burst speed spells or creatures. That could not itself be denied or otherwise interacted with, and was burst speed. It just everything. I think I said burst speed twice in that sentence, but it was incredibly powerful. Oh, and by the way, it was also a land, which are in Magic you have to draw your mana gems. They're part of your deck rather than gaining them automatically. So it was just everything about the card was amazing.
So, and this is kind of something I wanted to bring up, was that this was designed by a player of the, like, a high level player of the game. And what I've noticed with a lot of these games, these recent DCGs, these recent digital card games, is they're mostly all designed by professionals. And in general, I think I like that idea. The other thing about that, though, is that when you get a bunch of pros playing designing and playing the game and play testing it, they typically are fine pushing a lot of the power levels and liking a lot of really strong stuff. And I get that. But I think you almost need some sort of anhedonic leader that just sort of comes in and says, like, no, this is too much fun, this is too busted. I guess it's more of an issue of philosophical difference.
People who play, there are games where the answers are better than the threats. I mean, Magic for many years was like that. We'll not talk about Magic right now because we're in we're at an extreme phase in Magic, which we'll shy away from. But I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh was very much like that, and for quite a while, I don't know about a bunch of other card games, but there are many games where the answers are better than the threats, and I think that it is perhaps
Fair.
Games go in with a certain philosophy, and that philosophy plays out. And I actually think that since we're talking about philosophy, we should talk about this wonderful Steve Rubin interview we gave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this part of this might be that I don't like the types of decks and types of things that Steve Rubin likes as much. So maybe their design philosophy is just different from mine.
So I don't know if it's Steve Rubin himself, but he was in some sense speaking for what the company was doing. So at the very least, we can take his words to be representative of something that is true, even if it's not necessarily himself. So for those that don't know, Steve Rubin jumped into a Twitch stream, Alan ZQ, and just started answering a bunch of questions. So we're going to call it interviews, maybe the wrong word, but it was a Q&A session.
Yeah.
But something I'd like to highlight is a couple questions he answered about the design principles. It is intentional that protection and pump spells are much stronger than removal in this game. There are a lot of reasons for that, but the biggest one is allowing champions to be in play for multiple turns, and have proactive gameplay where you are rewarded for attacking and making plays. So we can talk more about kind of where we're going with that, but I think the key thing here is there is a vision with this, right? They want your champions to matter, and if the removal is good enough, the champions won't matter. Right. And it's frankly, it's a laudable goal, right? They're trying to make the game, the best parts of the game, the most important parts of the game, and I understand that, right? Yeah. They have a reason for this, and it's not even a bad reason. But it's also not exactly the gameplay I like, and especially when you find something that's particularly good to do, like a single champion that is stronger than others, like Lee Sin, then it will kind of warp what you're able to play.
Exactly.
And champion. I guess circling back to what I was saying about risk and reward, champions have very high reward, and if you intentionally mitigate the risk of them, then you run into the problem that the game is kind of all reward. At which point you just play the highest upside, and the biggest reward wins.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think we've kind of beaten to death our thoughts about this. We'd like removal to be better. We'd like if there was a bit more risk to playing various cards. Fewer things were burst speed. In general, if there was a way to deal with this game more reliably, other than having the biggest creature on board.
Exactly. I'm just sitting here reading through some of this stuff. It looks like they've already locked in that change on Lee Sin, which is great. So
yeah. So
looking forward to speculating on that.
Some quick hits about the interesting or important stuff going on. They've mentioned that for those of you who are having trouble dealing with landmarks because you're in a region that doesn't have a good answer to them, the remaining answers to landmarks are coming. Remaining regions will get them in the next release. They have a change locked in for Lee Sin already. I don't know what it is exactly. We're going to speculate. Yeah, we're going to aggressively speculate. My guess is that they're just going to bump his cost to 5. Like at 6, he was too late. Came down too late in the game. At 4, he comes down too early. At 5, that's maybe a sweet spot. That's also a very easy change to make.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of the coward's change to make, if you ask me.
All right.
I think you switch him to. I think you switch him to 4/3, make him cost. No, actually, I kind of just like pumping it up one.
I actually kind of like making him a 4/3, right? We talked about the incredible importance of the 4th point of health in this game. Lee Sin's got some built-in protection, right? He gets barrier through casting some spells in each round. So if you make it so that he's vulnerable to more things, then it's easier to kind of kill him through the barrier with a get excited. Yeah, exactly.
I do think every time I play against Lee Sin deck, pretty much over this past week has been through discard aggro. So that might just be because I'm tuning it around the fact that I'm playing that deck, but I do feel like that deck has absolutely zero chance against, which I mean it's fine if it doesn't, but I feel like there's enough 3 damage things or 3 damage creatures that I mean we've talked about it, like it just feels like you've got got to hit them now at least 3 times on one turn. Like you've got to do a body hit, got to hit the barrier, and then also got to take out that last point of health.
Or you have to have something with 5 attack swinging into him, and
and him not have 2 spells,
and a spell answer to the freaking
barrier.
To the barrier.
Yeah, and also then he has Bastion, and you're like, oh great, there we go, I lose. But
so other comments from this little impromptu Q&A, they are working on changes to Vladimir to make him a bit better. They acknowledge that it's hard to balance Vladimir because damaging yourself is just not an exciting thing to be doing most of the time.
Yeah.
So when the cards are good, it's usually because they're so numerically overtuned that they're not good in Vladimir, they're good everywhere. Like when Crimson Disciple did 2 damage, which I still would have preferred Crimson Disciple be able to do 2 damage and be weaker numbers wise. But
I agree with that.
We all have our various ways we wish the world had worked.
I think a 1/3 with 2 damage would be great.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. Or I was thinking 2/2 with 2 damage, so that's much better if you buff or heal it. But there's more work to get in the initial value.
Especially now that we have all that healing junk from Starspring and Raka.
Absolutely. And also, 2 health at 2 health, it's going to trade with or die to a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So it's not like it's 3 health was a bit beefier, and the first time you buffed it, it got to the all important 4. At 2 health, you need a slightly larger buff. Other stuff is they're looking at making Terra a bit better, but they're not entirely sure yet. They want to see how stuff settles out. Katarina, they want to be cautious with, because if level 1 Katarina is 3 mana, you just get to deterministic positions where you have a Katarina 9 mana and your opponent is dead.
Yeah.
and they think Fizz is good right now. And I'm not entirely sure they're wrong. I have always thought that Fizz was not the problem with Fizz, with Fizz decks, that is.
Yeah, I feel like part of the thing with Fizz decks is Hush is a thing now.
Yep, and oh yeah, that's right, Hush's burst speed.
Yeah, I feel like that's the big problem with Fizz.
Actually, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't mind Hush being burst speed. Hush is a fundamentally reactive card that shuts down some of the stuff that is strongest in this game.
I do agree with that. Although it is really funny that it is basically like everyone's complaining about Hush when it's like, yeah, but that's also because everything's burst speed. You know, like it is kind of one of those like chicken
you
versus
have to
eggs
use
things.
the burst speed to beat the burst speed.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, you know. Except we actually know which one came first.
They also
Yeah.
have mentioned that they are nerfing Bastion, and so I think we speculated a lot on
R.I.P.
the nerfs we'd like to Bastion. We've had a lot of ideas. We could rehash them here if you want, Dan, but I think that our listeners, all two of them, have had enough of that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try one more. Let's just make it 4 mana, keep it like this, but just get rid of the spell shield. How's that sound?
I like that. 4 mana, burst speed, give an ally +1/+1. All right.
Yeah. Let's see. So other design principles. Yeah, blah 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 blah. They're actually letting to ban region roles. I think that's fine for champions, because it's very clear that they want them to be. I mean, like it's coming from what, a MOBA game, so they want the champions to be important, and I respect that, and like I definitely do appreciate that, because I mean I do have some sort of attachment to the various champions.
Oh no! I found the question answer, which hurts me the most. He says he's open to other tournament formats than the ones they're running right now, but quote, a single deck with a side deck is not really something we've designed for.
That's just not true.
I mean, so let's talk about client versus card game, right? Their client really isn't designed for that. There's no
like,
UI set for that. They really are not built for even thinking about cards that are not the cards in your deck, right? They don't even have a graveyard, which can matter for stuff like sharks.
Right.
So, on the other hand, their game has just a slew of cards that are very, very bad, except against one deck. Okay, they got a few cards, but they are important cards. And Passage Unearned being the obvious example, but I'm sure that if I went looking, I could find 5 or 6 cards that I thought looked very strange if you don't have sideboards.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether or not they've built their game for it, they have definitely designed some cards for sideboards.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I feel like they need to. That I'd like them to utilize that.
Yeah. So yeah, when it said not something we've designed for, they just mean programmatically. For a second I thought
that is my assumption, right?
That
either that or they somehow think that Passage Unearned is meant to be played in the main deck, which I mean they're welcome to think that, but they're wrong.
I was gonna say, Steve, if you're listening and you think that, go ahead and send in your resignation so they can hire me, because y'all have made some great sideboard cards, and maybe I should just be the one that overlooks this thing. Actually, you know what, Steve? Just give me 2 weeks with your code base. I'll program in a nice sideboard thing in there, and I definitely won't hack the game to allow me to play my 40 Teemo deck. I promise.
And just for fun, they also have they're also going to nerf Make It Rain, which
that's a good idea.
No, this is going to be my Black Spirit Crusade, right? Make It Rain is real strong. It's like arguably the best removal spell in the game. Do you want to know what's better than Make It Rain? Like fully 80% of the buff spells in the game.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
You want to know what's like a really good apples to apples comparison of Make It Rain? The 1 mana burst speed Demacia spell that gives everything on your board tough for a turn.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a really fair point. I guess this game has mildly conditioned me to hate removal, because when I saw that I was like, thank God, and now I'm thinking about it and I'm like, oh no. We're gonna
It's
get
okay to hate
overrun.
removal, right? Removal is the thing that makes all the fun stuff you want to do stop. But the key thing is it also makes all the broken stuff your opponents want to do stop.
That's yeah.
Removal is necessary. Removal is the safety valve. Removal is the thing that keeps the game playable.
Right. That is what I'm saying. Like, I do think, I do get that they want the champions to be great and all that stuff, but it's like their kids in the candy factory and their parents just like let them go, and they're like over at the fucking store across the street, and they're just not paying attention to them because they just put every ding dang burst spell on this dang thing.
What I almost want is to make removal better and also make champions better. Like, how do I put this? It makes me concerned that leads to a game where the only thing that matters is who draws their champions. But right now, you can't play removal. Okay, yes, I understand. I just spent probably half an hour ranting about how sad I am that I don't get to play my Corinna control deck anymore, which is secretly what this is all about. But if removal's bad, what are you doing? How are you not? How is the game anything other than put big dumb bodies on the board?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of how it feels right now. It's like I draw my discard opening hand. I see I'm playing against, I don't know, like a freaking more mother deck, and I'm like, all right, let me get rid of all my 4-drops, give me all my 0-drops, and then I just put 5 creatures on the board by turn 3, and I'm like, okay, don't have Withering Wail. Oh, you did. Okay, I lose, and it's just like, I don't know. It just, yeah, it basically feels deterministic.
The telling experience for me, the thing that made me realize what was going on there, that really made me get on this crusade harder than I already was I was playing a game I had like some sort of daily quest to win a game with Aurelion Sol in my deck, and so I built like this Aurelion Sol control deck. Just threw in some Shadow Isles control elements and some Aurelion Souls and just like called it a day. Pretty straightforward deck. And I went and played a game and got stomped, and played a game and got stomped. And my rule was all bad. It's like, okay, fine. So I started just like, I made some changes because once I got on the plan, I had to make it work, even if it wasn't going to be like a fundamentally great idea.
Yeah.
So I made some changes. I took out cards that I thought were underperforming, and then I didn't know what to put in, so I was just like, all right, let's just put in some solid 1-drops, contest the board early. And then, 10 games of this process later of making small changes, I was left with this Shadow Isles mid-range deck that was using all the stuff that dies and leaves you bodies and like some good cheap target on mid-range creatures, and I was casting Aurelion Sol more. And that's the part that broke me, right? If I had just made a better deck and it turned out that the mid-range deck was better than the control deck, that would have been fine.
Right.
But the mid-range deck was better at casting the control cards than the control deck.
Yeah.
And that's what bothered me.
Yeah,
right?
That's a very good point, actually.
Right. It doesn't... I wouldn't mind it if, like, some decks are strong, some decks are weak, and it's fine to... it's fine to have weaker and stronger cards in the game. That's, that's kind of fundamental to what makes the game work, is cards are weaker or stronger in context, and you play around that, and you use all your wherewithal to make the best deck. What bothered me was that the best way to build a control deck was to build a different deck and then put some control cards in at the end, because the control cards were so bad.
Yeah.
Right? The leftovers of my Shadow Isles control deck were, at the end of the day, like 2 Withering Wail, 1 Ruination, the 3 Ace Souls, and like 1 Targon control card. I don't even remember what it was. It was probably Hush.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that didn't work, right? That was not right. That was a deck. It was a perfectly solid mid-range deck. But the fact that I was trying to play Aurelion Sol control didn't matter, because the best control card was 2/2 for 1 that became a 3/3 the turn you played it, because it contests my opponent's 1-drops better than anything I could possibly play as a control card.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of feels like that's, I guess that's fine. I guess I'm just used to coming from a game that's like, you know, the
Magic,
answers
where
are just,
despite
yeah.
the craziness of current standard threats, the answers are somehow still better than the threats in every other format.
Right, exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just like there's always something, and there's always an insane answer. I mean, modern's
Have
pushing
you
it, but even
cast a
that.
Force of Will?
Yeah,
Feels
exactly.
great.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't know. And maybe part of this too is like they just haven't fully expanded out the card base, but I'm just like, I think part of the issue with that control deck is like, I mean, part of the reason controls usually works because you have a fairly understood meta, which is honestly right about now, at least in the cycle of this meta. Like, this is a fairly understood meta, and so you should be able to like look at your control list and say like, these are the answers right now, but the best for me. The issue is that is pretty much what you said. You look at your answer list and you're like, oh, none of these work for any of the cards. Like,
Let's look at the control deck with some quotes around it that's running around in the meta right now. War Mother's Ramp.
yeah, it's a ramp deck.
Yeah, but you know, it's got some controlling spells, right? I'm looking at this deck, and it runs Vengeance and Ruination, which, you know, are fine, and it runs a total of 3 Withering Wail and Grasp of the Undying, not 3 of each, 3 total, as some healing. But, like, the control cards it's running are, you know what it's running? It's running Flash Freeze, and Catalyst of Eons, and Troll Chant. And 3 of each in the list I'm looking at. And these are cards that Troll Chant is not a control card.
Right.
This thing has only 12 units in it, and it's running Troll Chants.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, like, we've always known that this is a very tempo-based game, so, like, I do get the Flash Freeze, but also Flash Freeze is in there because, like, literally how else can you deal with most of the decks right now except by just, like, freezing them? Yeah, exactly. It's burst speed, your Lee Sin's now a 0 drop, or a 0 power. And that's just kind of where we're at. It's just like, geez. And like, heaven forbid they've played the Bash in the turn prior. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I
Also,
definitely played against.
In fairness to the Legends team, because this is the worst it's ever been for control decks because of how powerful Bastion and Lee Sin are. Like, even if they're not the best deck right now, they're very much the level 1 driver of the metagame. Like, the metagame is Bastion, Lee Sin, and then decks that are well equipped to beat it. So if we're talking, so we are at the worst point for control in Legends, which is why we're complaining about it this much this week. And yes, we are complaining a lot.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If words are hard, a change to Bastion and Lee Sin will reduce the prevalence of that, which will allow other different controlling strategies to be somewhat better. So
I mean, it is interesting
not fix
that
the fundamental problem,
also,
but it will create more room for the types of decks we like.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, though, I guess to like counter what we've been complaining about, War Mother does have the best Bayesian adjusted win rate right now, currently on the ladder. I'm not sure exactly how big this sample is. Actually, it's a pretty big sample. We have, 1,300 games played of War Mother, in which it won 786 of them. It is like the most winningest deck once adjusted, which is interesting. Maybe we're completely wrong. I mean, I don't think we are because it still feels. I think there's some argument to make for like a sort of game field issue.
Very reduced control package.
That's fair. I guess that's a good point. Is that it's actually not a control deck, so that's why I should. Yeah, it's like.
I mean, it still has control cards. It is still I think it is still fair to call it a control deck, but it is at the very minimum not. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not a pure control deck. It is not the kind of the archetypal control deck.
It's definitely not something like Karma or Heimer.
Yeah.
I do feel like when I'm playing against this deck, or when I'm playing it, it does feel like you're playing these rant spells, and then you play out your Trundle, and you're like, okay, gotta go. Like, there's no sense of like sort of a, a like slow grinding victory. It's like, oh fuck, if I don't kill him this next turn, he's gonna destroy me. Like, Trundle is like jamming the race car out on the track immediately at like 250 miles per hour. Like, gotta kill him now. But
I mean,
I don't know.
I imagine that I'd love to see some more complex statistics on this card, or on this deck rather. You know, things like how often does it win when it draws a ramp spell on turn, wording stones early, or how often does it win when it misses early ramp and doesn't ramp on turn 2 or 3, right? I'd like to see how much of this deck is a control deck with ramp tools versus a ramp deck with control tools.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I understand that the distinction may sound academic on paper, but in game they are significantly different things. Is the word I'm looking for.
It's interesting. I mean, this is, I guess, selling my point, but I feel like every time I've played against it, even when I'm playing the aggro decks, I do feel like it's at its best when it's hitting warding into like Catalyst into Trundle or something. I do feel like it is at its best when it's just like pure ramping.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Out.
I want to know whether it's only good when it does that, but it does that often enough that it's the best deck, or whether it's good whether or not it does that, but it's crazy when it does that.
Sure, I see what you're saying.
And I don't really have enough experience with the deck, though I've played some of it, and nor do I really have a kind of complete enough vision of ladder to know which of those it is.
Yeah, I certainly don't either. I mean, I'm still in shit tier, so who freaking knows? All right, well, let's do a couple speculations here to wrap up today. So we have the Lee Sin lock-in that I think we both already mentioned. I would just also like to mention part of my argument for him being a 4/3. He is blind. I think that you should lack health when you're blind. Like, that is a clear physical malady. You need to knock off a point of health. That is not healthy. Sorry. I mean, that's ableist or whatever. I don't care. All right. Let's lock in what we think the Bastion swap is, and then maybe we can kind of just each pick one little nerf that we want to see or one change that we want to see. What do you think the Bastion swap's going to be?
All right. I think the Bastion swap is going to be going down to 2 mana. And that's it, because it will make Notify way better against Bastion, because Bastion at 4 mana can't be notified.
Assuming that Bastion also gets turned to fast speed?
Nope, not assuming that. Just Bastion at 2 mana, clearly a nerf. All right. In all seriousness, I expect that what will happen with Bastion is that it will remain the kind of permanent spell shield as opposed to this turn spell shield. And they will remove the 1/1, the +1/+1 bonus, and I think they're going to try to keep it at 4. So I think they're just going to take the 1/1 off of it. That's it.
Interesting. That feels like something that is both something they would do and also wouldn't solve the problem.
Yeah, see, that's where I was headed with that. My expectation was that they would do something that sounded like Riot was a real numeric nerf that mattered and still didn't solve the problem.
Right. Yeah, this is sort of the issue that Politico people have with sort of like tech wonks, is that they come in and juke numbers around and then realize that the fundamental sort of issue or philosophy hasn't changed. And I think that might be the most likely change. I also don't know if it's the one I want to see the most. And I guess I was sort of envisioning my spirit by saying keep it at the same mana but drop the spell shield. Because that is kind of more that is actually the line I would want to see.
Strategy.
Yeah, exactly. We just call it like Bastion Spear or something, and then problem solved. No, I would like it switched to fast speed. Because he mentioned he liked the proactive casting. I actually like the proactive casting too. But I think if you're going to have proactive casting, you also need to have the reverse of it can be interacted with if it's going to be casted proactively. So I think putting it at, you could even go maybe 3 mana fast, just drop the +1/+1. That way it gets notified. I think, is that correct? Notify is 3 or less?
Notify hits 3 or less, yeah.
Yeah, so go three spell shield fast. I think that's worse than its initial offering, but I don't care. I don't think this card should be.
Well, initially it was a temporary spell shield, but
or
it
temporary.
Yeah.
I like the permanence of it though, because
I agree.
I'm fine with, like you said, he likes a proactive, so I think the permanence is staying.
I don't mind the card as much when the way it's being played is kind of building a big dude that can theoretically be answered by, I guess, a bigger dude or by a pair of spells. But when Bastion just turns
just a
into
dude
secret
pumping a dude
deny,
disguised by
but
another
burst
dude.
speed,
Yeah.
and better.
Yeah. Yeah, So, the initial Bastion was 3 mana spell shield only for the round, is that correct? Burst speed?
Yes.
Okay, so actually going 3 mana fast speed permanent spell shield is actually not necessarily a just
I mean, fast
strictly
speed
worse.
is so much of a nerf from burst speed that I wouldn't mind it keeping the +1/+1 if they did that.
Okay, I guess that's fair.
But like honestly, I would just make it fast speed, and while you're at it, make the stupid heal 4, give 4 health fast speed.
Oh
and,
my god.
Let's make
That card is a nightmare.
Everything else fast speed. Troll chant
That
fast
card
speed.
is a disaster. Astral projection makes me want to astrally project out of the fucking planet, dude. That's
Alright, so
disaster
astral
of a
projection to
fucking
fast
card.
speed, troll chant to fast speed, just everything to fast speed. Let's make it a game where you don't just have to have bigger units.
Was it astral protection? Yeah, astral. I said astral projection. Yeah, astral projection makes you want to astrally project. Good God, that card is. There's nothing more
Tilting.
just rage-inducing than like swinging in with discard against their like bare-boned protector, and then you fucking do your get excited to face, and then he heals, and then game over. It's just like, oh, okay, I lose.
All right. So other speculative nerfs, because we're here, we're doing some speculation on nerfs and buffs. Discard aggro is good, and generally when an aggro deck is good, it gets nerfed. So I'm guessing get excited to 5 mana, because we saw what happened to Blackspear, and that was a warning. And get excited to not heed that warning.
I'm going to. I'm actually going to do something a little different. I'm actually going to steal something from a guy I saw on Reddit. This is his proposed. In the line of Riot, I'm going to also nerf an answer. I'm going to nerf Make It Rain, and I'm going to nerf it in the style of, I can't remember what this guy's name on Reddit was, but he got pretty heavily downvoted. Make It Rain needs a nerf. My proposal is it can only hit enemies now. It can't hit the Nexus. It's guaranteed to only hit enemies, and that's it. It's still randomly targeted,
2
but it
mana,
only hits
Make It
enemies.
Rain, only hits the it doesn't hit the Nexus.
Exactly, and he tried to this person tried to argue that was actually a huge nerf, to which he was swiftly downvoted into hell. But I think it would be very funny if Riot, thinking they were nerfing an answer, accidentally buffed it a little bit. I think that'd be very fun.
Let's see. I got some other
that's my nerf.
speculation, because War Mother's Control, clearly a problem. And, you know, the problem is clearly War Mother, it's War Mother's Call itself, right? And I think the problem is it's just too castable. It's way too castable. Let's put War Mothers all the way up to 14 mana.
Yeah, let's put up to 14 mana. I agree with that. That way only I can play it. I do in fact have the 14th mana gem. I'm the sole owner of the 14th mana gem. I think, we've been talking pretty negative here. I think I'm going to go with a buff to end this out. We're looking at, in particular, a couple of underplayed champs. Let's talk about one of the most underplayed champs. Let's pull something off the top of my ass. Let's see. I don't know. Maybe Katarina. Let's put her to, on play, she creates a fleeting Draven. Free.
All right.
That sounds good. That sounds fun.
Start.
A free fleeting Draven, and you just get to play it, and that's that. That way you get to play more champions in your deck. 9 champions.
That's interesting. I kind of like that. Can you play that if you already have Draven in your deck?
Yeah. You get 6 Dravens. Yeah.
So not just Draven.
Yep.
Draven.
Exactly, and also he can be discarded for effect. If you discard, he just goes into play. So it works really well with the discard deck. I think that's going to be perfect. It'll balance out that get excited nerf really well.
All right. In the spirit of keeping things positive and talking about ways we can buff cards, I'm going to suggest some other buffs. And I think that since we're talking about bashing on the Lee Sin deck, we should maybe give a concession because we can't buff Lee Sin though; he's too strong, and we can't buff Bastion because it already got done. But I've seen a lot of like Lee Sin Zed decks, and Lee Sin, Lee Sin Bastion. These cards are too strong, but I think we could get Zed's got some room to grow, don't you?
Yeah, let's make Zed thick.
Nah, just a small change, not even a big change. Just Zed's already got quick attack, so his health doesn't really matter. So just give him a bit of extra health. Let's make him a 3/4.
Oh, yeah, that'd be just in line. That'd be perfectly in line.
Yeah, I mean, just give him the Lee Sin stat line, but he's not quite as good as Lee Sin, so you can have a cheaper cost.
At the same time, we do have to realize that the perfect counter to Lee Sin has now been sort of pseudo nerfed. Speaking, of course, of Diana, so we need to bump Diana to a 4/2 quick attack on her Nightfall ability.
Good catch. Good catch.
In fact, why not just give her constant challenger no matter what? She always has it. That sounds good to me.
That sounds like it would be pretty challenging to beat.
There we go. I think that's how we're going to end it today. So yeah, for Run the Terra, I've been Grandmaster Dan.
I've been Adam Munoz, and Stan's been out nerfing cards at Riot HQ, and hopefully he wasn't listening to us because some of our ideas were terrible.
I actually hope he was listening to us. I'm actually pointing to my nose right now, sort of as a hey, set the changes, Stan, and hopefully he'll get them in soon. We'll still be with his people next time, and we'll see you then.